Yeah, so I spent the last 10 years working on landscape performance with the Landscape Architecture Foundation. I started as a fellow researcher there in 2011 and started working on several projects. How many people have heard of landscape performance? Have you seen the website for landscape performance? Use those as, if you haven't been there and you're interested in knowing more about landscape performance, I would go there. There's close to 200 case studies now of unbelievable, really, landscape architecture projects. You know, you can go and look at the award winners from ASLA, and that's a good place to get information. But the research that's done on beautiful places like these same places is really done through landscape performance. So there's some great case studies, and I would urge you to go check that out. Today I'm going to talk about landscape performance, but it's so broad, and there's so many things that are studied that I'm either going to go breadth by talking about all those things, or I'm going to focus on closely on one thing so you can understand how measurement is done and quantifying is done in a particular area. But just remember that when you do landscape performance on any given site, you're not just looking at biodiversity, you're looking at heat island effect, you're looking at stormwater management, you're looking at workflow and how workers, if it's a residential or if it's a, I'm sorry, not a residential, but a commercial building or an office building, their satisfaction with the places where they live. So it really goes across a lot of different areas. Today I'm going to focus really on biodiversity so you get a sense of the depth, but we've done sort of everything. So starting with this, there's a report that came out about 3 years ago. It was written by the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, and you can tell that they put a lot of effort into in their name calling for their office because everybody remembers that. They don't have to read it off their slides. But it's the first and most comprehensive study on biodiversity on the planet. It covers all continents, and then there are suggestions and there are findings for each continent. There's actually separate reports for each continent, but the findings are pretty much the same wherever you go. And I'm going to talk about some of those as we go through this, and it helps to understand why we, as designers, need to be paying a lot of attention to this and tempering our designs for them. So you may know that there's been 5 major mass extinctions in the past. This number 5 here is the one dinosaurs were theoretically wiped off the earth. But the biggest one was about 250 years ago, just after Pangea started to break up in Siberia. And you can see in this graph that at that time, the rate of extinction here was almost 30%. The rate of extinction was about a third of all species on the planet were just gone because of that. There was closer to 15 to 20% for the dinosaurs, but that's it's an astounding number of how much. And so we're comparing to that. In this case, this is more recent, and we're looking. This is a blip on the curve, and you can see that the percentage here really is getting close to 2.5. So we're not up to 25 or 30%, but we are on an upward trajectory in terms of biodiversity and losses of species. And part of the reason for that is you can look at this graph of human population. So while we've been doing really well, the rest of the planet, species-wise, has been going the other direction. And so they've broken it down to different groups. So amphibians, conifers, reefs, and sharks and rays, 30 to 40% are at risk of extinction on the planet right now. Then crustaceans, mammals, and birds to a lesser extent, but still that's alarming to me. And so I want to talk about it because you hear a lot about about climate change and global warming, and that's important, right? But you don't hear as much about this. And I think that we need to be talking more about it. The extinction is, the rates are accelerating, so they're going up. It's unprecedented during human times. That's over the last 300,000 years, approximately. And they estimate about 1 million species are threatened with extinction right now. And this was the most comprehensive assessment of its kind. And so from a landscape architecture standpoint, our conclusion, and we're going to go through this a little bit more, is that we need to change the way, and I know a lot of people are, but we need to continue to change the way we design in order to restore and protect nature. So it's really great to look out the window here and see that it's happening next to the school where you guys are studying it, okay? Now if we can just get it on the rest of campus, that would be a great thing. Some more things to look at. The biggest driver for this, at least for birds, reptiles, and mammals, is habitat degradation, okay? So that's something we can do something about, right? For fish, it's exploitation. We're eating a lot of fish. We're harvesting the oceans very heavily, but behind that still is the habitat degradation. So to the extent that we're involved with habitat and restoration of that, for those of us who are interested in that kind of thing, it's really important to keep this kind of numbers along with us. Now, we didn't generate these, but landscape performance can generate numbers that can talk about how we're making an impact in this area. So is there anybody here who knows where that photo was taken? What city that is? Nope. Illinois? Not Illinois. Are there any Koreans in the? No Koreans. Okay. A lot of times I have people who know where this is. This is Seoul, Korea, South Korea. And I did my sabbatical there 3 years ago, just before COVID. Heaven, thank goodness. And I took this picture. I like to climb mountains, and this is Gwanaksan Mountain near Seoul National University, looking north over the main part of the city. And I think that this picture represents, well, let me ask you. Would you say that this represents the problem or the solution? What do you think? Anyone, just shout it out there. Problem? How many people say problem? How many people say solution? How many people say both? All right, good, good, good. Yeah, it's both, right? So overpopulation. Now, Korea has done a good job. There's a lot of people in Korea. This is the most populated city, so that's why you see so much city. But they've also done a good job of concentrating the people that they have in a smaller area, okay? So overpopulation is a problem, but figuring out where to put those people in ways that at least minimize our encroachment, our reduction of habitat loss is a good thing. So it's not just Korea where that happens. This is all of Southeast Asia, but you've probably seen this before for the whole planet. The whole planet is, we're a very successful species. When I was a student at this university, I think the world population was around 3 billion, going on 4, and now it's, 7, going on 8, and expected to be 10 million before I'm gone. So 1 billion, and it's just astounding where we're going with that. So we're kind of taking over the Earth. If you didn't know where that other picture was from, you probably wouldn't know this one either. This is the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea. And it's an example, I think, of what can happen when you just leave nature alone. So has anybody heard of this concept of self-organizing systems? It's a good thing to know. So one of the things we do, I'm involved with ecological restoration. Part of that is choosing plants that you're going to grow in a place. Part of it is managing for invasive species. Part of it is restoring the contours of the land, the hydrology, and all of those kinds of things that we do as landscape architects. But this idea of self-organizing systems is simply leaving things alone. So if you want something to be restored and you want to see it next year, you can't just leave things alone. It's not going to work. But in this case, the land has been left alone and not touched and not cultivated and not restored for 70 or 80 years since the end of the Korean War. And this is the most biodiverse area on the Korean Peninsula, and maybe in this whole area of Asia. So there's a lot of talks, not as much with landscape architects, although they should be involved, but with the horticulture community in Korea about someday, if Korea gets reconnected north and south, that this needs to be a place that's preserved because of the value of it. And there's some good examples where the Iron Curtain went across, between Eastern and Western Europe, where areas have been preserved. So there's a greenway that goes all the way down from north to south, and it's a good example. So, all right, we've talked about biodiversity. We've talked about things that we can do. Now I'm going to talk about a project that I worked on back in the early 2000s. This is in Costa Rica. This is a field office or a field education and research facility for Texas A&M. There was a person who graduated in 1955 from Texas A&M and made gobs of money and bought a place in Costa Rica in this beautiful, pristine forest, and then went back to Houston for the winter, and then went back to his house, and he wasn't in the pristine forest anymore because development had gone up all around him. And he sort of saw the light and said, we feel like we need to preserve what's going on. So this is, have you heard of the Monteverde Cloud Forest Preserve? Have you been there? Good, good. Anyway, it's a wonderful place. You get a chance. It's 4 million acres. It's huge. And it's one of the, I think it's one of the top 5 biodiversity preserves on the planet. And so if you get a chance to go, it's wonderful. This is on the sort of the southeastern coast of Costa Rica, of this cloud forest. It's built on top of an old farm. So if you know anything about restoring things in the tropics, you want a forest, you can't just say, I'm not going to do anything, the forest will grow. You can't even plant trees and then take your hands off and say it's going to grow, because the weeds are so aggressive that they'll just overtop the trees that you put in, they'll die. So what you need to do in a place like this is to plant the trees and weed whack underneath them until about 5 years the trees grow enough, they have enough canopy, starts to shade out the weeds underneath, and then you can let it go and it'll start to organize itself afterwards. So this is what we were doing. I worked with this architect, Guillermo Vasquez de Velasco. He was at A&M at the time, and he's moved on to several other places since then. And then the team. These were all graduate students. So if you're graduate students here, so this is what it looked like when we got there, at least the lower part. So the farm was up above, but this stream went right past the side of it. And it's just an incredibly beautiful place. And, honestly, we really didn't know what to watch out for. There's a lot of venomous snakes and some other things. Now when you go down there, you have to put these shin guards and stuff on your legs so that you don't have a problem. But we were having a great time. We were down there for about a week, and we surveyed this forest, and we came up with some ideas. Obviously sustainability is an important one, and we also thought of accessibility because there was a group of people who were wheelchair bound and who had been going down here. They were people who attended Texas A&M, but they'd been going to a different university's place. And so we wanted to design this place not just to be accessible, right? You guys know about accessible design. We wanted this to be the place to go if you were in a wheelchair and you wanted to experience the Cloud Forest Reserve. So we had some really elaborate schemes, and a lot of them have come through on this place. But one thing that we learned in this process is that people in wheelchairs, many of them are in a lot better shape than I'm in. They're just stuck in a wheelchair, right? So are there ways that we can design the campus that has, how many people ski? Anybody? So the black diamond and the blue square so we were coming up with schemes that some of them were more challenging than others, and some of them were for people who had more difficulties. But the idea was to get people out to understand and learn more about the cloud forest. So we went out there, we did a survey. Those contours are all ours. We spent 7 days with a total station going through. If you look close enough, in the contours you can see there was an old farm road that came up this way. And there was another one that we followed here, but then it went up that direction. So we ended up wanting to get people quickly up to the top of the ridge, so we designed a switchback in there. And this campus center, this is the academic building. These are all bungalows. So the architect designed the buildings, and we, the landscape architects, put the plan together. We decided this is where we want the academic building, and they designed one of these. We decided there should be 8, depending on how many students are going to be down there, and we arranged them into this kind of a campus plan. And you can see that you can drive a car up here. Those are all parking spaces measured out along there, and that's walking. So the cloud forest is out that direction, and 4 million acres right out your back door, and then you beautiful views off of this ridge side here. We did models. The architect demanded that we have this bridge. This is how we were going to handle things for people in wheelchairs, is give them an elevator and have them go across this. But of course, we didn't like the landscape architects. No, we didn't want to do that. We wanted to reforest, right? So now this is the academic building here. This is the plaza out there. We're putting trees in there. We're going to have this new forest, and that got X'd too, unfortunately. You don't get everything you want when you design these things, because the person who is donating funds said there needs to be a place where you can land a helicopter. Now, why would you want to put a helicopter in a place like this? Anybody? Emergency, yeah. Venomous snakes, right? It's like 6 hours to get to the nearest hospital from this place. It's really, really remote. So that became a helipad instead of a bridge or a reforested area. But there were lots of other places. This is the design development so we're reforesting this area of the campus where the bungalows go. And this is what we do, right, as landscape architects. It's a little shocking if you've not done this before, but we dig up the dirt, right? So this is the road going in. This is the switchback going in. So we're taking a lot of earth down. It was a farm, so it wasn't virgin forest. These are gabion walls. How many people have heard of gabion walls? Good. So these are important down there because, first of all, when you build a wall, any kind of wall, if you don't have places where the water can come through, you build up a lot of hydrostatic pressure behind the walls. But you don't on this because it's entirely porous. That's number one. Number two, in this area of the world, what you're looking at is habitat, right? Now, we didn't ship these rocks in from China, which has been common at least that time of year. I mean, at that time period, all kinds of granite was coming in from China. This is all local stone. So there's no chemical differences between what's there, what was there and what these are. And so it provides all this habitat in this area where things grow 360, 724, 360. And the idea was to actually turn that into a shelf with plants from the area that we could, sort of a learning shelf with all kinds of plants growing on it. You can see, in this case, there was some revegetation. Now here's the forest, and this area in here, when I was down there 10 years ago, hadn't been reforested yet. But I told you how you reforest these places. So it's been done, and I have to take another trip down there to take more pictures. But thank goodness we have Photoshop, because we can put these things in and pretend that we grew a forest, right? And then this is the circle where the helipad is. And in here, if you look closely, there is water. So there's, it's a rainforest, and there's a lot of water that's coming off the hills. And there was a spring near the top of where the bungalows were, and we routed that to come through. It comes right down the side here. And when I was there was all kinds of lizards and frogs and other things growing in there. And I didn't know it until I went with a naturalist at nighttime who had a high-powered flashlight, that there's a lot of snakes in there as well. Okay, most of them are not venomous, but he showed me and told me which ones to stay away from. And I can tell you now, anytime I go through the rainforest, especially when it's raining, I'm bringing an umbrella with me, because they're all over the trees. And if they drop on your head or your shoulders, it's going to be startling. But this is the one, this is the red-eyed tree frog. So if you go down there and you buy yourself a t-shirt, that's the frog that you have on there. These things are not venomous. It's the only one you see somebody holding in their hand, because the other ones have some pretty nasty things in their skin that you won't like it. Let's put it that way. So so all those things are growing in there, and eventually, this was right after it was built. So it had been about a year and a half. And I've seen some other pictures. I don't have any to show you, but this is all grown in. You can't see the gabion walls anymore. It's all habitat. That's it from a distance. I've got a few more pictures I can show. Everything was ramps. No stair. Well, there are stairs in there, but everything was accessible by ramps. And this is a little constructed wetland that's at the top. That little stream that's coming down goes through this wetland first, which was really fun to put in. Some views you can see from the different bungalows out into the different directions. I like to say that I designed the waterfalls, but I didn't. Those are natural. But I had to sneak them in because they're so pretty. In terms of water, so how do you get water to a place like this? Okay, you can dig wells, but there's so much water coming out of the hillside. It's just sort of leaking or eking out of the rocks. And so what you really only have to do is build in this case, a concrete box around where the water's coming out. And this will fill up, or has filled up, and it provides water supply. There's not a lot of water that's used on the campus, but there is water. All the rest of the water comes out. So the same flow that was coming out before, most of it is still coming out and down the same stream, but it's put into a box first so they can use that. And then, I don't have pictures of it, but there are constructed wetlands, subsurface flow constructed wetlands that we use for the septic. So all of that water evaporates or transpires, and nothing is actually sent out into the, they're hydrologically separated when you build these things, so there's a liner, and it doesn't leach into the ground. And this was a model because most of the septic in this area are just outhouses. And it sounds like, the way the U.S. was 200 years ago, but that's really the truth. They're still doing, most people don't have indoor plumbing there, up and down the road where this is. So this was a model to show what you can have. And then, I'm a typical self-centered landscape architect that loves to take pictures and show it to people. So there's my more picture. But I have a question for you now. What do you think? Would you say this is a successful project working towards biodiversity or no? How many people would say, yeah, it's successful? And how many people are not sure, right? Oh, okay. So anyway, for the people who raised their hand the first time, thank you very much. You're best friends forever. And but I'm going to trick you. How do you know? Right? I showed you some pretty pictures, and I told you a nice story, and we built this thing, and you could see. But I don't have, I didn't give you any numbers, right? I didn't give you any proof. I just, we've been doing this for years, and I came to these lectures, and I saw people showing really incredible work, but there was nothing behind it other than the story to tell. And so landscape performance is really about providing the proof that says that your design is a good thing. Okay? So I'm going to show you some examples, but first let's define what landscape performance is. If you've heard of LEED, they started coming up with ways. They recognized that buildings were one of the biggest users of energy, and how could we reduce energy? And shortly after that, the landscape architecture folks got into it and developed the sustainable sites. And so with sustainable sites, there are ways to look at environmental benefits, habitat quality, energy use, air quality, stormwater management, flood protection, and all kinds of things. So we can measure all that. Social benefits. You can, give surveys, ask people how satisfied they are with the place they live, how much walking do they do, are they inspired to go outside? There's all kinds of questions that you can ask. Scenic quality, food production, noise mitigation. There's economic benefits. You can measure those as well. And so we do all those things. And the purpose here really is by quantifying landscape performance, we can articulate the value of excellent design and provide, it's not just to sell ourselves, okay? Really, I think the biggest benefit for us as professionals or designers or academics is to learn, right? Because if we measure these things, we'll learn from our own work, whether or not we're making a difference, whether the work that things we're espousing, our ideas are working. So the idea is to provide reliable and valid evidence to justify our design decisions. There are ways to do it by looking at the goals of what the project is supposed to, you can measure what those goals are. You can look at regulations and say, well, have I met them? Have I exceeded them? You can draw information from construction documents. You can gather secondary data. So there's a lot of public agencies or volunteer groups that collect data. The Christmas bird count, right, as an example. There's records that your client might keep. So we did something with Loyola University in Chicago, and people visiting their campus just to take a tour to learn some of the sustainable things that they've done, the numbers went up. So how many people were they reaching educationally to learn more about sustainability? There are decision tools, there's calculators, estimation calculators. You can go out and do your own field measurements. Tends to be more expensive, but that's something that we do. And then combining these methods, so just a combination of these different things together. And then you want to compare them to benchmarks or to standards, or in some cases, comparing one site with another. So I'm going to show you an example of that. In the early 2010s, the GSA, the Government Services Administration in Washington, D.C., created and built a new headquarters for the U.S. Coast Guard. And then we were brought on to do the landscape performance study. This is the Coast Guard building. You may have seen it. If you look, it's been in Landscape Architecture magazine a number of times for various different things. And when we were there, we studied a bunch of different things. So I'm going to focus on biodiversity. So we looked at heat island effects, and if anybody's interested in that, that was my most enjoyable part of this project, was the heat island effects. I'd love to talk with you about how to do that. There's treatment and capture of stormwater. There's sequestering carbon. There's transportation alternatives. And then the promotion of outdoor activity and satisfaction among the workers on the campus. So here is the Google view looking down at Coast Guard building here. That's the big lake you saw in front, is the stormwater pond. Over here is a traditional office building. This is about 4 miles away. And we compared the two. The scale is exactly the same between these two. So the sizes are comparable, okay? But what do you see? What's the difference between one and the other? What's the most striking thing you see off one of them?
One of them has a lot of green and plants, and one of them is just pavement.
Yeah, exactly. And so this is the way we've done things for years, is build a high-rise make a big parking lot. Everybody comes to work, works in the building, maybe have a nice view. But this was an alternative way to do it, and it's really different, right? I mean, for GSA to say, we're going to build this instead of that, that's a huge leap. And the GSA is probably the biggest ownership of property in the United States. And they do this everywhere, right? So it's making an impact for them to be doing that. Christian Gabriel used to be the director of landscape architecture for them. And I worked with him on this. He's moved on to other. I didn't know that. Oh, he's a brother of mine. Good. I'm gonna have to. He's still in Maryland, so I'm gonna have to look him up. I know where he is. He's at. It's called MNCPPC, the Maryland National Capital Parks and Planning Commission. I love the way they put these names together. It takes you about, I don't know, a year to memorize them. But yeah. So anyway, we compared those two. And this facility has 12.5 acres of green roof, right? 12.5 acres. At the time, it was the third largest green roof in North America, behind the Ford plant in Michigan and something else in Toronto. I can't remember what it was. I don't know if it's still the third largest, but that's a lot of green roof. Okay, from a biodiversity standpoint, can you tell the difference between one and the other? Is it obvious? Is it too obvious? Right? Okay, so if you like begonias of different colors, you've got plenty of begonias, right? If you like zelkovas, you've got at least, I don't know, 100 zelkovas on the site, and so on. But this was Andrew Pogon that did the designs for this. You can see that there's difference. Now this is a courtyard, but it's also a stormwater management pond, and it is also a habitat. And it does many things in one place, and this is just after development, so the trees are not as big as they eventually will be. And what's strange about this place is you never know where you're on structure and where you're, on land, basically, not on structure. So there's, parts of these are green roof and some aren't. So what the place looks like in plan view. This is the idea that they had. These were different. I don't know if you can read this, but there's different types of northern Piedmont habitats that were used as inspiration. These are all in Maryland. And then the southeastern plains, the Chesapeake rolling coastal plain, and then the mid-Atlantic coastal plain. And so they took their inspirations, their soil, their conditions, their plant selections from these, and they distributed them around all of those courtyards. This is stormwater management, okay? So once you've filled up this cell over here, it comes into this cell and then into this one and so on. It's sculptural, it's local materials. Bluestone might have been from Pennsylvania. But you can see that what they were doing, anybody know the difference between an extensive and an intensive green roof? Because I don't want to explain it if you know already. Okay, I'm not going to. So anyway, some of these are, again, it's hard to know if you're on structure and when you're not, because even once they were out there, even the designers and the manager of putting these together didn't know. When we went there and collected information, we were putting these temperature sensors. This is for the heat island effect in these different places. And this one place that we identified that we had to put one had a huge wasp nest in the ground. It wasn't and I think it was in that mound right there. Lucky for me, the graduate student wasn't as scared as I was, and we went and placed the thing out there. But anyway, so it really does attract, it is habitat, right? It's attracting pollinators, birds and so on. And it's a place where people obviously can go out, sit on benches and talk, get away from the office. I mean, for some reason 4 million keeps coming up a lot today, but this is 4 million square feet of a building, office space. And you can see how it was designed. Now, this last picture is probably the one you've seen the most on LAM, the Landscape Architecture magazine, but it doesn't show, I think, the biodiversity effort that was put into this. So here we have a list of plants. It's not all the plants, but it's got all the trees. and the quantities. And I'm glad that Cercis canadensis was the winner of the tree category because it's my favorite tree. And then these were all only plants with 1,000 or more quantity included. This place is massive. And you can see that these different grasses and so on, if you look down the plant here, that's 30,000. 30,000. Can you imagine trying to source those? Right? That's a lot of plants. So it took years to line up the plants to put in this place. It's just huge. There are 800 more native trees than the traditional design place. There's 700 more native woody plants, 12 distinct. Now, this last bullet point was all from our survey. We asked people what kind of wildlife did you find out there. But they saw turkeys. There are eagles that are constantly going past these windows. And foxes, groundhogs, skinks, insects. The deer, there are some places it's actually easy to get on. You could actually hop on. I mean, if the police wouldn't, it's a highly secured facility. They had to walk me. I had to have an escort everywhere I went. But the deer don't have to have an escort. And they've jumped up on the roof because there's something up there they really like. So interesting. All right. So I'm going to ask you the same question. Is this successful for biodiversity or not? How many people say, yes, this one is successful? All right, good. All right, thank you. All right, I've tricked you once, and now I tricked you again. So what about 10 years from now? All right. So from landscape performance, it's always been about going out there a few years after the project's been done, and it's in the perfect condition. It's probably never going to be better than this. And we do our measurements and we say, hooray, we did a great job. And then 10 years later, it's not quite as good as it used to be, right? So this is my critique of what I've been involved with for the last 10 years. We need to go beyond this. And so really the question is, do we go with this static approach, this post-occupancy evaluation, or do we take it farther, okay? And to take it farther, we need to get into something more dynamic. We need to think about monitoring, so things are constantly being measured. Ongoing management, we need to get into that. Permanent sensing, sensors, technology is expanding in so many different ways and the prices are coming down. I don't know, maybe the last year they haven't been, but permanent sensing, Internet of Things, if you know what that is, tapping into that. Management of data and interfaces are things that we'll need to produce, and something called site commissioning. Site commissioning, there's a white paper on that the GSA put together because they're doing it. It's really taking into account the idea of monitoring from the day you have a conception to going through all the planning and so on. So I'll talk about that in a minute. Yeah, so how do you do monitoring? So you need to come up with models of how to measure some kind of a landscape, whatever it is. And we have some examples. This first one on the top is about albedo. So we already know reflective values. There's been a lot of modeling that's been done for that. The one on the bottom isn't, it's not called intelligent farming, something agriculture, but something like that. And so measuring all the water that's being used, measuring the soil temperature, the soil moisture content. Every part of the farms these days are really being monitored. So it's being done in a lot of places, and we just need to tap into it. Reservoirs, streams, wetlands, all of these places are being measured one way or another, and they're all part of the landscape, and we need to tap into that so that we can know what's going on. So in-stream, they even have these multi-sensors, so you know temperature, pH, conductivity, the flow rates, the total nitrogen, phosphorus, suspended solids, and so on. You can measure things with bioacoustics. Anybody heard of bioacoustics before? Couple? Good. Yeah. So with that, basically you're just listening to wildlife or city life, and there's been work to help define what are you hearing, right? And so when I was doing things, I was doing remote sensing And we're doing something called supervised or unsupervised classifications. And you can do that with aerial photos, but you can do the same thing with sound, okay? To know if you're, what kind, not just if you're listening to a frog, but what frog is it you're listening to? What bat species is it that you can't hear, but it can hear, and so on. And this is what they look like. They're small, they're lightweight. You can just strap them to a tree. I would do this in a wetland somewhere, but I wouldn't do it inside the Beltway of Washington, D.C., because it probably won't be there when you come back. Camera traps, right? So we don't actually trap the animals anymore. We take pictures of them. It's a great way of getting information. I don't know how many of you have cheated on your quizzes for you'd never do that, would you? Yeah, but you can, these things, and not only are they helping you to identify the plants, but if you allow them, they will geocode and know where the plants, where you can find them. And that helps build a database to know where these things are. UAVs. So some of us we have some enthusiasts, right? So I live and I work so close to Washington, D.C., it's almost impossible to fly a drone. It's 30 miles outside of Washington, D.C. is a no-fly zone for drones. So I can do it in Baltimore, but I can't do it in D.C. Anyway, all kinds of things you can gather with drones these days. It's amazing what you can mount on one of these things to monitor long-term ecological systems, invasive species, disturbance, ecosystem structure, and so on. Phenological and temporal. Everybody know what, how many people know what phenological means? All right, well, it's an important term, right? Because as we have climate change, we have plants migrating from place to place, things moving around. And more that's going to be part of something you need to think about. What plants am I going to plant now? Because 50 years from now, the conditions may be different. And so get to know the phenological word, because you're going to hear it more and more. All right. So monitoring, you can you can monitor plants, macroinvertebrates, fish, insects, birds, all of these things from a biodiversity standpoint. And in your options, acoustic monitoring, camera traps, annual reporting. I put some pictures up there at the top about tagging, right? So we know we can tag, but when I was going and looking, what's the breadth of what we can tag and monitor? It was amazing for me that you could actually tag a butterfly, right? Or a tortoise or a fish, and so on. So that's why I say the sensors are getting more amazing. And in the end, you're going to be collecting more data. It's such a data-rich environment. How do you make sense of it? So you need to start thinking about what data needs to be on your dashboard. How many dashboards do you need? And what kind of decisions do you need to make? How do you need to be informed? So it's not just the data. It's how can you turn that into usable, actionable information. And I told you I was going to say what site commissioning is. It's really benchmarking during the pre-development planning. You need to target the measurement opportunities during design. And then at the end, you need to implement basically during construction and verify during site management. So it's really all phases from concept to management at the end that you should be talking about as you go through these projects. The benefits can be cost savings. You would have a net positive return on investment, lower liability claims, and so on. I'm almost at the end, so if you have a dinner date, please bear with me for another second, and so on. So site commissioning is really where that's going to happen. And so in conclusion, these are not earth-shattering. The biodiversity is critical to the well-being of human beings. Design, planning, and public policy must support biodiversity. I mean, some of it's coming out, under Obama's biodiversity, especially for pollinator policies came out. And you have to quantify. And then only, and this is really my bottom line when it comes to the future of landscape performance, it's only through monitoring that we can really adequately, I think, document landscape performance. It can't just be this one-shot deal. I'm going to switch gears just for 4 more slides, because this is stuff that I've been working on for 10 years and talking about. And thank you for having me up here to talk about this with you. There's some new research I'm getting into. It's with these. Anybody have one of these at home? You got one? Okay, people are afraid to raise their hand. You know, I'm going to just put this on my face because a lot of people, I found that my students are like, I'm never going to put that thing in because people are going to laugh at me or take a picture or something like that. So anyway, this I think is the future of what we do. Okay, so if you've not seen your own design, how many people have used Lumion? Okay, we have a few Lumion people. Okay, all of our students know Lumion because I force it on them, whether they like it or not. And but from Lumion, you can literally save a stereoscopic image. It's just one push of a button. So once you've created your 3-dimensional model, you put all these beautiful plants on it, you found that perfect place to look at it from, you can make a stereoscopic, and then you just have to bring it into this and view it. And it's very quite simple. So I want to show you a few things. I'm getting into some of the effects of climate change, especially in the Baltimore area. There's flooding. This was taken in 2019. It's in downtown Baltimore. There's a number of communities that are really affected, and it's usually low-income people who are most affected by this kind of flooding in cities. And so I want to advocate for better protection, and I don't think things like this are good enough to sort of give people, you know, decision makers, people with money, to understand that there's a real problem. But this is an engineer's report for the community of St. Michael's in the Eastern Shore, which is a wealthy community, right? And this is what they're getting for their plans. You know, that red line over there is a berm that will supposed to protect those houses from sea level rise. And then we've got some sections which we, maybe as designers, might understand them, but most people haven't got a clue. And so what I've been doing is trying to simulate flooding. This is a flooding, it's a little dark, but I've got them in here. So what you're looking at is a 2-dimensional projected image of a 3-dimensional surround 360. This is Lumion. It's just Lumion. So you can build this model of the town, and all you have to do is put a plane, right? Just a simple plane in SketchUp, and call it water, and bring it into Lumion, and you've got yourself a flood. Now, I showed this to somebody who'd been in a flood like this, and they said, the water's way too clean. So I spent a lot of time making that brownish color on there, so it looked more like a flood. And then this image shows sort of what you can do in places like this. This is elevate the sidewalk, elevate the crosswalk. You're basically creating a levee system out of your infrastructure, your sidewalk infrastructure, to keep water out of certain areas downtown. So if you're interested, I have these things loaded on here, and I also have some student models if you want to see these things. It may take a while if you all want to see it. I am supposed to visit some studios tomorrow, but I'm happy to show you what I have in here. And that's all I have, so thank you very much.